All right, everyone. So as you see here, we have a very impressive, a very diverse group of beautiful humans sitting up here to talk about some of the non-human things around ethics and AI. So full disclosure, I did not use ChatGPT to come up with any of my questions, which is maybe blasphemous because we are in an AI business conference. Instead, I really just wanted to use my heart space, my curiosity, and pivot, because what I'm hearing today in the room, and especially coming after Jackson's presentation, is there are a lot of questions and concerns around the lack of transparency in AI. And what we're lucky to have here, and what you are lucky to all witness here, is this group of really impressive people who are coming at it from all different angles. And I think I'd love for us to be able to have an open dialogue, a chat, and a bit of a debate. And I know Carole over here is going to debate everyone's answers, so that'll make for some very interesting conversation. So to kick things off, keeping in mind time and want to give everyone an opportunity to speak as well, if we can just start, Melissa, with you and just kind of go down the row, and if you could just share one-liner in terms of who you are. I know that's going to be tough. Who you are and what you're working on now with respect to AI, just to kind of level set the room.
Okay, thank you. My name is Melissa. I'm the founder and CEO of Satoshi 21, which is essentially a blockchain founder C-levels community. And we are now opening our Web3 hub to build a cultural technological hub in Batubilik. It's Core. The name is Core. And we are helping startups, individuals to come together and build prolific business connections. And I'm also a member of Open Ethics, which is working on building guidelines for users, companies, and widespread use of AI, and the application of the ethical guidelines for general implementation of OpenAI.
Beautiful. And Pops, you are mine.
My name is Raamayan Ananda, and I run a company called Creation, and we are a API integrator that helps people find the best AI tools for their uses and strings them together to provide really powerful workflows for creators, for businesses, and for entrepreneurs. We want to make it easy so that you can use the tools with one click. We don't want to make it so you don't have to search and look for the 1,500 tools that are being released every week. I also have a blockchain-based protocol. We own a domain called ethical.art, and we're using Web3 to be able to create ethical distributions for models that want to train on ethical data sets. And I'm here because I'm super fascinated with this emergence, and the ethical considerations go way beyond just content. They go into the nature of our civilizational existence. So some important conversations.
My name is Carole Favre. I'm also known as Carole the Storyteller and Vision Whisperer. I'm a poet, I'm a writer, I'm a thinker, and everything that I do pretty much is about emotions, values, and purpose, as well as education. Oh, and I'm here because 3 months ago, I swore that I would never touch AI. And I had a moment of reckoning, realizing that my values are about adventure and curiosity, and that my fears should not take over my values, and that I should really connect with the new world that is being created as we are talking. I'm an older woman, and I think that a lot of people are very afraid of AI, especially women. There are not many of us around, and older people. And I really want to debunk that. I want to be part of the change in order to enroll more people into the change.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tracey Bowen. I'm the founder of HerdOwl, Her DAO is a diverse developer DAO. We've been around for about a year and a half. We operate in Asia, Africa, Latin America, in Europe. And our mandate, so our mission is inclusion and diversity in the Web3 space. In terms of AI, I've been doing a lot of data research, AI research centered around algorithmic discrimination, AI bias. I was a fellow or Creative Media Award winner with Mozilla, where we looked at a lot of this stuff, and with Mozilla's help, set up a organization called the Black Tech Task Force to kind of monitor the AI landscape and to help to form policies around AI ethics and harmful technologies.
Hey everyone, I'm James, and I am a human flourishing and life optimization researcher. I've been a social entrepreneur for about 20 years now, and I've built 9 businesses. But my connection to AI is I actually am one of those people you hear about online, the AI doers, AI preppers. I've been in this movement called effective altruism for about a decade, and we were the first to really popularize this and make it more salient. So I've been on this side of trying to advance AI safety through community building, through like individually coaching and supporting researchers, regulators, activists, entrepreneurs, and trying to figure out this whole field, what we now call AI safety, what we do about it as a species. So this is near and dear to my heart. I've been worried about AI for like 25 years, and now it seems like it's here. So we got to do something about it.
Thank you. Okay, well, that is really powerful, because I think just even the spectrum of perspectives and concerns we have a bit of a, maybe a bit of a pessimist, a worriest in the mix. We have a curiosity. We have some solution-oriented folks. And so I think that will make for very important dialogue. And I think, you know, the point of this really is that, so we actually did a talk on moral compass, morality and AI a few months back. I think it was May, actually, on Speak Up Monday. And what's interesting to me looking at that time versus now, it's only been 2 months, that conversation was met with a lot of people sort of kind of perking their heads up and being like, oh, okay, I didn't know that that's the inputs that I'm going to be getting when I interact with ChatGPT. And that was maybe the surface level response. Now, in 2 months, we're seeing just here at a business conference, we'd be remiss to not impart to business owners, people who are building and now using this tool, how they can better input into that collective intelligence to allow for a society that's going to be using this, whether it be future generations and children. And so the pace of change and the pace at which we are now, I think, responsible to be social responsible in how we interact is so important. So the conversation here and what everyone's listening to is going to have that ripple effect. So just thank you all for being here and for listening actively. And we're going to have an opportunity in about 30 minutes or so to have questions from the audience. So keep that in mind. Okay, I want to talk about the big bad word bias. I want, I guess from my perspective, as someone who is a bit of a generalist and just started using it, is I would see things like where it comes to language bias or racism inputs. So I would search the term bride, for example, and it would be the visual that would be outputted or description would be Caucasian female in a white flowing gown. What was not depicted was the bride that is maybe of Indian descent wearing a red sari. Now, for someone like myself who is, you know, an older generation, I have the ability to sort of mitigate that information, question it. I know the concerns I have some friends of mine who are parents or about children and teenagers who are interacting with technology and are not being given a fair set of balanced data that comes back. So that's just one example. Also, there's language bias and things like that. So I'd love to just probe into that a little bit in terms of, you know, maybe here, Tracey, the work that you're doing in terms of actually the research and try to develop a code of ethics around that, what you've been seeing, what you think might be a way forward. And then I'd love to have a bit of a dialogue with everyone on your use case scenarios.
I think for me, and the research that we did, one of the main shocking things that I discovered was that in the American criminal justice system, AI can actually send people to prison and they frequently get it wrong. So they kind of calculate a recidivist rate, and a judge will use that in their kind of sentencing. And the information, the data that they're training the AI models on are maybe from over-policed areas, and obviously who gets targeted the most, right? So, that's like a really harmful kind of bias in the system. And, the fact that AI can change the complete trajectory of your life is kind of a bit scary. But the thing is, like, AI has been with us for a very, very long time, and it's because we haven't really noticed it in our lives before. So when we're applying for credit, when we're using kind of like Google Maps, when we're using Facebook and getting our feed, you know what I mean? That's all AI. But like now with ChatGPT, it's coming to the forefront and people are like, oh, AI just got here. Like that's not the case. It's just because it's more obviously overt in our lives now. So more people are involved in the conversation. But I think with the research I did with Mozilla, I was very sort of energized because I was finding out all of these things and the machine learning and the kind of unrepresented kind of like data that they were using, and all of these kind of problems in the kind of processing cycle and the manufacture of algorithms and black box technologies where, companies can create algorithms, but you don't know how they've created that algorithm. And then if that algorithm kind of causes any harm, there's literally no one to hold accountable. Like, these are the things that were like super scary to me. And then I was looking around to see who was doing anything about it. And I was like, not many people. And I did like a little film and I was like asking people on the street, like, have you heard of algorithmic bias? Like, discrimination, like, do you know anything about it? And people are like, no, and so that kind of said to me that, this is something that we really do need to talk about more. And whilst we're getting excited about AI and all of the great things they can do, be mindful that, we do need to address certain situations and certain prevalences like bias.
So thank you for saying that, because I think, you made an important point that the collective intelligence that has been fed for decades, right? So with every interaction that we had with the internet has been feeding the outputs and what we're learning. So even though ChatGPT kind of blew up in November and everyone was now, it's like a buzzy hot topic, it's, as you said, it's been around for years. And so people are now sort of forced to, I think, see the impact of their thought processes and their decision-making and how that gets inputted. But doesn't that also lend itself for an opportunity to actually now sort of de-bias that, unprogram and do all that? And I'm curious to understand that from Raamayan and also you, James, because you guys talk about it from sort of like more of like a visionary and sort of the way in which we can, as humanity, sort of change the course. And so what opportunities do you believe there are for us now? We recognize that we've now fed this system this information. So what is on us as humans to chart forward?
So it's a good question. How do we first understand the bias and then de-bias? What does that even mean? From what perspective do we consider a bias versus normal? These are really hard questions. They're actually philosophical questions and epistemological questions and metaphysical questions that somehow have to be solved. Then we can input them into some sort of system that might actually be able to do something about it. A friend of mine is building Humanitas, which is literally trying to de-bias these data sets so that when they are used by these, by civil institutions or by governments, that they might actually reflect the values that they choose. Short answer is, well, they're like Series A, so they got some money, they're trying to figure it out. We need maybe billions of dollars more to figure this stuff out, like to solve the ethical side and to solve the technical side to actually do it. So who knows what's going to actually happen in the next few years, but it's a growing space. It's a very interesting space. So anyone cares about social entrepreneurship, this is a great space to jump into to try to do this debiasing work.
It's like a many layered cake. On the highest level, you look at the Buddhist viewpoint, and a lot of the conclusion of the Buddhist viewpoint is to reach the non-biased state, which is to reach a state of the overview where you're able to perceive the nature of duality and bias but not be hooked by it. And that is considered to be an enlightened condition. Because bias will always exist. Because bias is relative to value systems, and it's relative, as you were saying, epistemologically, to how value systems arise, how cultures arise. So what we consider a value, when you said you inputted bride and it gave you white people, well, did you input it in Hindi or English? I'm sure if you input it in Hindi, it would probably give you a different result, right? But we're so conditioned that English is the only de facto language that we're using that we're conditioned. Right? There's thousands of languages out there, and there's thousands of ways to reflect the collective consciousness. Where are all these companies right now coming out of? Silicon Valley, right? So of course, they're going to be biased towards Silicon Valley, and rightfully so. They're American. It's English, Google, right? English comes from that entire world and that worldview. Sure, if you look at China, you look at the data sets, you're not going to see the same thing. So there's a lot to consider here when we look at, what is the homogenized global mind? Because, Teilhard, a philosopher, said that we have this thing called the noosphere, or the collective nous, or the collective thought. And in Indian philosophy, they call it the astral plane, or the plane of manas. So there's actually planes of reality in which all of our thoughts and emotions actually exist. So in a way, AI, through the way that it's taking in all that data, is giving us this golem or an avatar that's essentially becoming a reflective tool of our collective mind. So how we ping that mind, how that mind is constructed, and how we're able to have a relationship with that mind is really profound. It's really significant. I think what we're going to see in the future is each different country will have their own, essentially, AI. They'll have it related to their language, related to their culture, related to their way of perceiving, related to their particular bias. So rather than try to de-bias, sometimes we need to acknowledge bias. We need to acknowledge the different levels of bias that exists and bring it into the light. So when the bias exists in the light, we can have more conversations around it. I think the challenge comes when some of these biases exist at deep levels behind, as James was saying and you were saying, these closed-door black box ecosystems that are existing specifically to manipulate our attention. That is where the problems lie. And so I think the challenge is, how do we create policy that allows for transparency of bias rather than trying to continually de-bias?
So then now Melissa, I want to see your thoughts on this, is who is responsible for creating this policy or this code of ethics? I mean, I imagine it's a collective responsibility because we're inputting into that. What are you seeing sort of in movements, if there is something that we should be considering, or as business owners who are going to be creating, who creates this and when does this happen and how does it happen?
I mean, it's happening now, right? My friend Tristan Harris and Azar Raskin are part of a Center for Humane Technology. They just met with Biden like 2 weeks ago, and there's a deep effort right now, and in government as well as in private sector, to voluntarily put forth how they're going to create regulations. So they're trying to get ahead of it. I mean, the fact that they're meeting people like Tristan means that they're taking it seriously, because you don't meet someone like that who's freaking doomer, right? And it's like laying it out unless you're serious about it. So I think there's acknowledgement of risks. But the problem is, as people like Daniel Schmachtenberger have always laid out, you have these multipolar traps, which means that if we're going to put ethics and limit the uses of technology in a certain way, maybe China won't, and maybe they're going to develop competitive advantage because we're putting ethical guardrails and limitations. So in some black box in the military, we're going to say we're going to put regulations here, but actually here we're not going to really regulate because we have to advance at breakneck speed. So, I think some of the ethical implementation considerations of AI may actually lead us to more existential considerations of, what does it mean to be a nation? What does it mean to be a collective people? What is our actual identity as the individual? Am I really just American or Chinese or African? Or is there a new planetary identity that we must inhabit in order to meet the existential crisis that AI is presenting? So these are some deeper existential questions that I think we need to sit with and have the courage to ask.
Melissa, I see, sort of looking at you, just I can see the wheels turning, and I want to get your thoughts.
Okay, I'm going to be a little confrontation about this whole thing, right? And take a step back. And I think we should think about where the ethics applies first. When I started my cognitive science master's in 2013, it was basically to study AI. But I was more or less more interested in consciousness, how like self-awareness, kind of like agency, like everything that is uniquely attributed to human systems. And then I realized like, okay, it's very hard to find a similar entities, similar function in any machine learning generated entity. And then I switched to more neuroscience and web sciences to like try to find a similar thing, which was not easy anyway. One big reason for that is that consciousness that is required for ethical accountability, it requires 3 levels basically: aggregated, integrated information, action, and consequences, and to proceed the consequences, to process the consequences, placing yourself in that social environment. And I believe without that feedback loop, especially then processing it in an internal way with belief systems, with like social consequences as kind of like trial and error, that's sometimes harmful or rewarding to the entity itself, we cannot talk about ethics or morality. So I think it's a bit anthropomorphic to talk about the ethics of AI. Ethics is still our ethics. So I think it's really important to understand that like everything we are talking about, the morality and like the bias and everything, it still applies to humans, institutions, corporations, states. So it's still our problem. It's not, I think it's kind of a little it's easy to like try to hold AI accountable of everything we still couldn't figure out basically. So there's a huge decision-making problem basically. What to take how to define the criteria of action and decision-making. And it's not simply gathering information. It's just like Raamayan says, it has a lot to do with the value system, belief system. And there's a good bias. There's like non-discriminative bias. There like belief and value systems are essentially different throughout the all around the world. And there might be different hierarchies between like what people, individuals, and like organizations prioritize. But that's why the transparency should be at the essence of all these things. And one of the Open Ethics Committee's mission is to basically create that user level. What kind of an entity you are in touch with, what you should expect, what's the general value set maybe, and how to consume it. So this level should be transparent. And that's the whole blockchain idea of like open source. How can you even make sure the that program, it actually does what they claim it to? So like there's actually like all that execution problem before coming to like, I mean, what we should expect from AI. And that's there I think we should ask the accountability of the whole thing. Eventually, if you're going to use AI as kind of like transference of the agency and the ethical responsibility, that's still on us. So I think we're not there yet.
Yeah, no, thank you for saying that, because I think, there's that viewpoint that people are kind of painting AI as sort of the scapegoat, and it's like this big bad technology but really we as an individual have been inputting into that. So then it comes back. So as we were saying before about consciousness, the way we think, what we're fed, but now we're in a scenario where we have fed it. So now we have to ask ourselves, okay, who are we holding accountable? How, as you said, like what kind of companies, what they stand for, what are they putting in place? But at the end of the day, it's up to us, right? And that puts a responsibility on everyone. So talking about the individual state then, Carole, I see you've been nodding your head, and I know we've had, let's see the scribbles happening. So I want to, because you're coming at it from someone who was like, no, don't want to use it, and I want to, operate from a heart space and be a storyteller and all these things, which you are. And now you're thinking, okay, I need to find a way to integrate that. Well, where does it come back to you as an individual, and how do you question it? Who do you question?
Wow. How do I question? Repeat your question.
Because I think you are very representative of sort of the general population who was a bit fearful, then a bit curious, and is still trying to find a way to work with it. And I'm curious to understand who do you hold accountable, and what's your view on that?
The first person I hold accountable is myself. I think, I agree with what Melissa and Raamayan were saying is we feed this thing. So we're parents. We really have to look at AI as a child. Mo Gaudat has this wonderful image. He speaks about Superman. The Superman's just landed. And Superman could become a great guy, or he could become a villain. And the only difference between what we end up with is the family that he grows up in. And he happens, to land onto a farm with nice people who give him great values and educate him to do good in life. So we have to understand that when we have a conversation with AI, we actually need to treat it as if it was human, remembering that it's a machine. So I have conversations by saying, thank you, you did a great job, I really liked it. Or when ChatGPT invents something because it is designed to please us, so it will give us the answer that we're seeking, even if it's a lie, I then have a debate with it. And I say, hey, why are you lying to me? So the first person is me and what I put into it, because we're all responsible for it. So it's a collective responsibility at a personal level, because we're building something together. And it has a lot to do with curiosity and pessimism, because I really came at it from a very pessimist point of view, thinking that we are all doomed. And that makes you ask questions about how you can change it and how you can use it. The few things that that I got from everyone talking is the fact that we are now using AI as a new religion, and ChatGPT as God, and Perplexity or Bing or whatever is happening as the angels. Yes, in whatever kind of frame, religious frame that you're using, and that really is the risk that we're taking. Like we were hearing the truth. Ellen Jackson mentioned Elon Musk, wanting to go and seek the truth. What truth? And who the hell are you to tell me, what truth according to Elon Musk? A man. It's because it's not my truth as a woman, yes, and it's not going to be the truth of humanity. So then, who is the holder of truth? And we're having a U.S. election very, very soon, the first AI-run U.S. election, and we're going to see what's going to happen with how we shift the mind and how we create bias into the mind of electors, because it takes 5% of misinformation to make us question things. And I think that what you're saying about dealing with making sure that we know that there is transparency, across the bias, that's the best way, because we're human. AI is a reflection of our limitation as humans. So it will continue to be biased if we want it to be human. That's, we decide it's got to be a machine. And we're going to build a Buddhist version, an enlightened version of AI And by doing that, who makes the decisions on the legal basis? The governments? Or do we now get to have civil servants that stay across different government? We go from conservative to from the right to the left, the right to the left, the right to the left, but we have people who stay constantly in order to manage AI and the integrity of AI. So it really is about questioning, and not putting all your belief into thinking that AI is the answer to all your problems. It isn't. The answer to all your problems is you.
So what I'm sort of taking away from the last few comments is that I think we can all agree. I mean, AI is here. It's a technology. We're using it, and we've been using it without knowing it for many, many years. And so instead of us kind of looking to it as this big, bad beast, it's, okay, on an individual level, human level, how can we shape our thinking? How do we think about our future sort of generations? How are they being fed information, education, taking it back, as you said, to sort of like looking at, are we one nation? And those conversations are big conversations. And that's really about, on an individual level, how we impact another individual, right? Because then we have that sort of ripple effect. And I do want to shift to questions, but Tracey, I wanted to get because you're actually working in that space, and you're working with, a diverse group of developers. So seeing what they've sort of been receiving and how they're working, based on what you're hearing from our panelists today, what comes up for you?
I think people have already kind of stated that, it all starts with us. Like, we're the one programming the computers. We're the ones where, our intrinsic bias is being reflected in the code and all of the, software and tech that we're building. And I suppose, yes, of course, we need to mitigate these things, and we need to build sort of like processes to kind of deal with our sort of intrinsic bias, et cetera, but also I kind of think we're not going to be able to rein everything in, right? We are not in control of somebody working in a basement in Alaska or Armenia. We don't know what they're doing, right? And we don't know how they're going to deploy these things which may kind of harm us. So I suppose what I'm kind of hearing is we can make it kind of culturally acceptable to be kind of ethical about AI, but in my mind, there's a limit. That there's always going to be like a limit, because we will not be able to control everything. And then I suppose, I just keep thinking about the network state and AI. So that's kind of, like a Web3 based sort of like nation state, and how that might work in terms of AI, and how that might be a great experiment. So there's loads of great experiments that we can do in terms of how we can construct new societies and new cultures and new ways to do things. And I think that's what's exciting about what we're all trying to undertake now. And there's loads of these discussions going on within Web3, and how blockchain and Web3 can kind of, counter all of these kind of new, problems or issues. But yeah, that's kind of one of the main takeaways, I think, is we can only do so much.
Yeah, I just wanted to lay out, just maybe, because I know we're moving to question and answers, just a little bit of like the landscape here, right? On one level, you have AI and ethics and military. Coming back to the nation state architecture, the fundamental power dynamics in the games that are at play on our world that are very macro, that have been played for a long time, and that are going to continue to be played, and that AI is only going to leverage it. You look at drone warfare, it's happening right now in Ukraine, right? So that's one level of AI ethics. Another level is AI in our economy, right? If 50% of our jobs are going to be automated within the next 20 years, it means that we need to redefine the social contract completely. We have to. That means, what is post-capitalism in the way that we know it now? And we have to look at that and redefine it. It's, our ethical imperative and consideration to have the questions of what does it mean to be a worker, really, ultimately, right? And then you have AI and democracy and the ethics. I mean, you just spoke to this next election. Well, we're going to look at essentially the tech and media platforms are the information dissemination houses. And there needs to be a panel and a true alliance amongst different media and tech houses to look at how data is being categorized and how psychographic targeting is happening, and putting a lot of limits on psychographic targeting with AI and a different level of transparency around content being produced around AI. And we have to unify and align our approaches across these different sectors. Otherwise, they're existential threats on all of these levels: military, economy, democracy. I mean, these are fundamental things. So there's huge opportunity in the sense that we now have a collective avatar to be able to reflect off of. But the real challenge is not AI, it's can we evolve human consciousness fast enough to meet the threat of AI?
The other thing is, from my understanding of AI, it codes itself. So since we've released the beast, and the beast can code itself, we really have no control of it.
Yeah, let me echo on these last 2 points. So the way I look at AI is something like an alien superintelligence from Alpha Centauri, and we've known for decades that this is going to come. We didn't know exactly when. So then the 50s and 60s were the first kind of initial groups into researching AI and AI safety, but mostly on the development side. And then so we've known from around then that this was going to happen. So I want you to all imagine that we have this like super intelligent species. They're arriving at our door on our planet next year or 2 years or 5 or 10. Most of the estimates get this around, well, there's a large field of people doing forecasts, but most of my friends who do this put it at this decade, next decade. Some people say now, some people say to 2100, but imagine in the very near future, we do have this alien species here. So none of us actually knows what they're going to think, do, want. You can make some assumptions based off instrumental convergence goals and some other theoretical constructs that help us predict a little bit, but we don't really know. So we as humans are going to be this tiny, like ant equivalent to this massive species that has much more capabilities than we do. So it's a really, I mean, everything we're talking about makes sense. We care about short-term bias, we care about distribution of resources that come from this, but fundamentally we're facing off against this incredibly advanced species that we don't really understand. So we should act with humility.
I just want to counter that for a second, because we don't even understand ourselves, right? In yoga, you have a very complex multidimensional energetic system that can astrally travel through dimensions. Like your chakra systems, we don't even understand what it means to be able to utilize a human body. Most people are like very, very limited. So we think of intelligence as regurgitation of information or mind, but that's actually just the mental plane. That's one plane of reality. So how do we also look at human intelligence and what it truly means to be human? And maybe this is an actual reflection for us to awaken and realize that we have way greater powers, and that a supplemental mental construct or a collective mental construct, which yes, of course, can be more intelligent in terms of its ability to capacitate information, is not necessarily what it means to be human.
So I'll take a little bit of pushback on what it means to be human and like our powers. For me, that's sort of unnecessary to really get into, because what we're creating is post-human. It's a different type of alien intelligence that is going to probably surpass us in many, if not all ways. So it's like, there's truth in what we could become, but my claim here is that this is one of the most transformative periods of human history by far. We are kids playing with fire or playing with hellfire. So if you've seen the movie Oppenheimer, it's a really good touch on what we did 75 years ago when we first brought into the world atomic weaponry against other nations. So since then, we've always been at a risk of existential demise. We could have, and we almost did multiple times, destroy our entire planet. And these are, men and women, other people that have this power, and they don't know how to wield it. I think, to your point, I agree. We don't really understand our values. We don't really understand how to do these fundamentally complex adaptive systems called humans and called institutions. So for me, it's just like we are ridiculously risky in trying to develop frontier systems that we certainly don't understand how ChatGPT works. No one does. This is the whole point. They don't know. So it's like, yeah, we're rushing forward to do this without really much pause. But when we developed nuclear weapons, there was at least, Manhattan Project and others, there's at least some math and thinking into what the risks were. And if you don't realize, there was a small chance that we would destroy the entire world just by accidentally releasing the first atomic weapon. That was a tiny percent error that would happen. And they went forward without your permission, without my permission. So our ancestors or, parents and grandparents did this without our permission. Now we're doing it today. So other AI developers doing gain of function development, trying to advance, there's 100,000 plus of them, are pushing us forward without your permission because they want to make profit or because they think they need to race other people. It's a bunch of ridiculous claims. There's about 300 people in AI safety full time trying to actually prevent that. So it's a little bit like you can imagine the 300, the famous Spartans, and a few thousand others that supported this fight against it.
All not pass.
Yeah, this is the state we're in right now. So all I urge is we slow down and we actually understand with some small percent chance that we would actually destroy the world with atomic weaponry, much higher percent chance we destroy the world with AI. The last survey that went out, 2022, there was about 48% of the researchers in this space said there's at least a 10% chance. Well, it depends how you frame it. 5 to 10% chance that we actually go extinct in the next few years. So keep in mind, we're not just talking about profits, we're talking about extinction. Can't have profits if you're not alive. So that's my major claim. We should slow down, be much more careful, and then we can actually solve all the other problems about how we actually use AI to benefit the world.
So before, thank you, Brother James. So when we were putting this panel together, obviously I know each of you pretty well. Raamayan, I've just meeting you. Each one of these people, right, has a zone of brilliance, right? So the point of this panel wasn't really to answer any questions. It was to create questions for you to think about what the answers might be. I'll say it again. The point of putting this panel together wasn't to create answers to questions.
Well, and I was just going to add, and Rob, we all are on the same wavelength, is that sort of the point. So the questions that are asked strategically is to create a space of vulnerability and interest. And I think we know that we're not going to solve the world's problems in this conversation. The intent is that we have these 5 thinkers who are coming at things from a slightly different perspective. At the end of the day, the commonality is that we're all human and we want things to be a better place. And it gives an opportunity for each of you to challenge one another, which in turn challenges everyone in the room. So with that, I'm going to go to someone in the room to ask a question.
So just following on for that, while I'll quickly finish. So the point was that each of these guys here, we're going to go to lunch after this. So you will undoubtedly feel an alignment with one of them or more of them. Take the time and have a chat. What James is doing, which he's not going to talk about today, but I know because we had a chat about it, is extremely deep, right? And he's not going to talk about it yet, but maybe if you have a chat to him one-on-one, you're going to get some of the answers to what I'm already talking about. So, Haidai, over to you.
Okay. Yeah, ethic is a very interesting concept. To me, it's like, and I'm a Balian, a priest here in Bali, so I can talk about it. It's like cognitive porn. There's a lot of good fantasy going on, but and it's fun. Don't get me wrong, it could be fun. But I want to talk to Mrs. Sentosa. Is it
from Melissa? Well, Satoshi 21, but Melissa is on it.
But Melissa, yeah, I think.
Satoshi? Is it Satoshi? Satoshi?
Okay, perfect. Maybe, yeah.
Satoshi from Roundtable? That's Satoshi?
That's right. It's me.
Okay. I'm more interested when you talk about execution. Like, what are some of the execution that AI is doing that we need to look out for, that we should be concerned about? I think that's. I think if everyone could talk about that, because then we can say, yeah, is it to us ethical or not? And we can contribute to the debunking it or contributing to it. Okay, this way.
Thank you so much. So, there are, of course, there's so many things to actually talk about, and to actually reply any of these questions, we need to debunk many premises we all use in our little answers, basically. So, but execution, when I talk about execution, is basically when you ask a question to OpenAI for now, there comes a behavioral output, a linguistic output. And that's an information that we process as the other party, basically. So it depends on our processing level, what we are going to do with that information as well. Just basing, like, let's say you ask, like, is the humanity good or bad to OpenAI? Or like, any of ethical, or what should I do with my life? What should I do with my business? How should I present this, that, and this? So eventually you take that as the agent in this real world who is within the ethical realm with the real consequences and in touch with other humans and organizations. And if we do, like, if we execute these bluntly, then there comes challenges. If, for instance, when we are talking about the like censorship or like more regulated AI, I think I'm not sure, like, because AI is not like OpenAI is not the same like a couple of months ago. Basically, there's now a lot of regulations coming. I don't think we should start with the execution of what it says, but we should, like, everything we're talking about ethics, it still exists, be it the AI or not. It in terms of like the how to take action in business, in real life, as institutions, as organizations, as states. Like, these are real questions we should be talking about, even if there's no AI, there's no technological advancement in any way that's much interesting for anyone. And then we can get back to the execution level in a way that, like, okay, there is the information out there, and there's how to use it, and there's what we are going to do in case we failed. And AI is not yet taking that much collective input with the failures in a way that it processes, that is one thing that's different than human entities. You know, when you are in contact with fire, with a danger, you immediately process that as a harm. And that prevents you to do it again and again, basically. And that's how you learn. But AI is not taking the input. If I go execute what exactly it says, and the results are not encapsulated or taken as an input to that. So execution part is also really important to create any technology on that level. And this is actually very essential because, like, for instance, when we're talking about the ethical values is still there for us, relevant right now. For instance, very minor example is basically, is AI superior than us? Like, our intellectual, I think it's a qualitative difference. It's not the superiority point. But when we put things in terms of, like, in hierarchy, that's basically where we're coming from with value system already, and we are imposing those binary, oppository value system to it. And I think it's just qualitatively different. Like, there's still a lot we as humanity achieved and can achieve with our different sort of, like, unique intellectual properties and being sentient and collective intellectual intelligence and everything. So at every stage we are basically imposing our value system, and by trial and error we execute it, and we should integrate ourselves way more dynamically.
Yes. That's your question? Okay.
It's just going to change when you get robots. Telling y'all, you haven't seen the robots yet. When robots are out there and they start to look really human, and they're starting to be programmed to respond to you in specific type of voices, and they're around, it's going to get weird. Get weird.
Yeah, it is, because there are seven types of intelligences. I spent 20 years of my life teaching, and it's one of the things that I had to learn when I graduated as a teacher. And now I think we're experiencing one type of intelligence with AI. Yes, but when AI gets to be embodied, which is the only thing that it isn't, right now, then it will touch. It will be able to associate touch with memory. And then it really has the potential to become much more human, because it will interact with other humans. And it will remember what you said. And it will remember what you said much better than what you said. Yes, so we talked about accountability. So it will be there to make you accountable. It will be there to remind you of your ego. It will be there to be the perfect partner. It will be there to replace a human being as a perfect partner. I mean, it will change everything. People are already having sex with robots. So it will change. You were talking about, we're going beyond this thing about what it is to be human. But actually, we really have to ask ourselves what it is to be human in interaction with a robot.
So then, just to make sure kind of answering this question, because I think we agree that we are asking what it means to be human, but when it comes to execution, so thinking about it to his point about from like a business standpoint, or how they are kind of run their businesses, how would you answer that question?
Okay, can I? Yeah. So basically, be it business or interpersonal relationship, what AI lacks at this point, the way we know, it's the mind theory. Basically, it doesn't register, it doesn't recognize as the others as an entity. Basically, and in business deals, basically, what you need to do is to make a deal that is prolific for yourself, but also if you want that relationship to last, you also need to mind the other party's benefit as well. So this can be computationally modeled, obviously, but I still believe it's kind of a little bit more. It's fed by a little bit more wider value and exponential pool, basically.
Well, I mean, look at Google's release of Bard. Let's just use that as a good example. Okay, Google has been developing AI for a long time. DeepMind, stuff that it's been putting out. It didn't make it public and commercial because in their minds, ethically, in their ethics, in their internal panels, it wasn't ready yet. It wasn't ready for human consumption. But the market made them. The market demands said, if we don't do this, we're going to fall so far behind, and it's so existential to our business, we have to get ahead of the curve. And internally, people quit. Internally, people were leaving. It was a really real challenge. But the business imperatives, which are the survival based on profitability, are always going to supersede ethical considerations, because that's the nature of capitalism. It's literally the nature of capitalism. So the only way to be able to get ahead is to be able to do some level of future casting, is to be able to have more than the 300, ideally, right? Is to be able to have strong government mandates, to be able to ensure that if those things aren't met, there's prices to pay. That it means going head up against the multipolar traps and acknowledging them and considering them. I'll give you an analog, right? A big movement right now is called the Rights of Nature movement. Has anybody ever heard of this movement, the Rights of Nature movement? No? So you give legal rights to a river. So right now, the whole thing about capitalism is you have externalities. An externality means that I can dump in the river and it doesn't cost me because there's no direct relationship between the cost of me dumping in a river and the cost of my product. So it's called an externality. But when that river can sue you in court, which it currently can't right now, because it has personhood just like a corporation, in which you've now assigned that river to have personhood, and you have a council and you have capital that river has $1 billion now that it can take you to court. Now it's not an externality anymore. Right? Now you literally can be sued for what you're putting in up to 10x. And so you're not going to dump in that river anymore because it's no longer something that you can calculate in as an externality. That's huge. Right? You've now given nature personhood in a way that actually can affect your balance sheet. So in the world of capitalism, it is the most effective way to actually stop the degradation of nature. So what is that analog in AI? That's a question I have.
Okay. I think I want to just be a bit mindful of time. One more question, and then I have just a final statement to kind of wrap us up and move us into lunch.
Over here, guys. Okay. So really, really great points. I'm going to circle back to Tracey's points is we can only do so much, and I tend to agree there. It's very good. And also what James is saying made some really good points. Going back to kind of enforceability of this kind of technology, telecommunications has got the ITU, mobile has got the 3G, PPP, etc. to kind of standardize, and also you've got cybersecurity, international standards organization. Does the panel not think that the ISO could basically adopt a kind of standard, an ethics standard into their framework to basically implement the ethics into it? So you've already got the framework, it's internationalized. Is that possible?
Yes, of course. Yes, we can have a global standard of ethics. Actually, in my research, I interviewed one of the directors at ACLU, who, they frequently take on cases involving AI, people who've been harmed by AI, and I think this is probably something that they're very sort of aware and keen to do as well, in terms of accountability. So, and this is the other thing that I was thinking about, like practically, what are we going to do? James, James's work is involved with a lot of that as well, accountability and like, yeah, of course they can invoke standards. Yeah, I mean, is that the question?
Yeah, really, because a lot of it's interoperability with a lot of this technology. So if it needs to interact with each other, if you put a governance framework with the ISO model, potentially you can kill two birds with one stone to have it controlled and apply the ethics into that model. It's a potential because the framework's already there. Because, instead of governments operating silos, they could all basically work together. I'm just thinking it out loud.
There's more than 100 actually guidelines that are out there for now. But two things. One is the coercion, like how it's going to be actually applied and coerced to follow. And that's when we actually go back to the governments and state, which is for me not the optimum solution. It needs to be intermediary institutions, but and it's like general awareness, public awareness. And then like if we talk about the interpersonal relationship, I don't think the regulations and the law and everything exhaust everything that we could say ethics basically. So that's probably my answer.
This question has been researched for decades now. We somehow have to solve ethics to actually encode ethics in code. And when you try to actually do this in lines of code, it doesn't work, at least not yet, because we haven't solved ethics over the last few thousand years of philosophers trying. So that's the hardest part. The other really, really hard part is maybe we have some of these voluntary guidelines. Many are being proposed and they're already voluntarily adopted. UN, for the first time in history, like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, said that AI was an existential risk. So they finally got on board on this. So this stuff is all happening now. It might work for now, for the next few years. Maybe some companies hold back. Maybe some researchers don't actually deploy their systems. But when it becomes sentient, or when it becomes recursively self-improving, so an artificial general intelligence, everything we as humans have tried to put as constraints on it no longer applies. It will likely have different values and different goals than us because, well, there's a lot of like this orthogonality thesis, there's instrumental convergence goals and so on. All this we can get into if you want, but fundamentally we don't think that what we encode now will apply post-AGI. So yes, we're going to try. We'll do it.
I have a question for you, James.
And then we see if we actually can take on this alien civilization or not.
Do you think part of the solution may be to prevent localization? Localization. So basically, when AGI happens, to ensure that there's still centralized data sets that are processing it rather than try to localize that on a specific robot or machine to allow for fail-safe.
My sincere hope is we never build AGI for the next decades, centuries. I think if we do that, we're all dead. There's really no going back from that. So the best bet is we actually don't do this kind of generalized intelligence. We do narrow intelligence, narrow AI that does not recursively self-improve, because that's like, the Titan kind of thing. We can't take on something much smarter than ourselves. So my hope is humanity comes together and decides to actually, just like we did with nuclear weapons, there are non-proliferation agreements. Only a few dozen countries have weapons. Unfortunately, North Korea has 30 nuclear weapons. Did y'all know that? Kind of makes you pause, but we did something reasonably okay the last few decades and we didn't destroy ourselves. But we got to do that times 10, times 100 the next few years to actually prevent this as a major risk.
Do you think we should be doing some sort of global education sort of program so like everybody understands what AI actually means and what it's capable of, and like this whole, like, how would you approach it?
There's a number of films and movies and so on coming out, and there's like people in our space who are actually full-time, well, not full-time, they're creating memes for the sake of their social impact work. It's fascinating. Like, if you're good at memes, maybe you should join the AI safety kind of movement. Skull did some really good movies around like pandemic preparedness. So Contagion is a really good movie that was meant to teach humans about what a pandemic might be like. Came up before COVID. So watch it now and like actually look at how prescient it was. So these films should be coming out and like educating my people. But yeah, it's going to come down to like what you're saying about multipolar traps. There's one phrase we use called Moloch. It's like this, it's like, imagine like the worst monster, the Balrog from Lord of the Rings, but you can't really understand why and how it operates, but it's in between everything. And it's all these individual actors. So like all of us are part of Moloch. We all have individual values. We all want to make money on AI, or we want to have fame or status, and all that together, combined in a complex adaptive system, creates this monster that will destroy us all. Just like capitalism has some great sides, but has some disruptive sides too. So that's Moloch. We need to fight Moloch somehow. If y'all have ideas, please join the fight.
Maybe we have to use AI to fight AI.
That's workspace AI.
So maybe we have to use AI to fight AI in a kind of a weird way, right? If Moloch is a god of coordination failure, and then basically having an adaptive intelligence that's able to help us coordinate our shared value system to be able to fight itself. I mean, kind of ironic anyways.
Okay, so I'm sitting here listening to the dialogue that's happening here, and I feel like this is just the beginning of many conversations we could be having. And I think what's really interesting to me is just the debate that's even happening amongst the thought leaders up on this stage. And I encourage everyone to sort of find each of you when the time is right to talk more. So just as a final parting statement for what is going to be part one of, I'm sure, many conversations, is if each of you could close us out with 30 seconds on who should come find you based on what you offer and what you want to impart. And if instead of it being ethics of AI, if the statement was ethics and AI.
Who should come find us? Well, I mean, anyone who's in technology, who's interested in cultural development, aligned with it, builders, technologists, entrepreneurs, because basically what we're trying to do is to contribute to a, I don't know, I don't want to say conscious, but some sort of an entrepreneurship where, as builders, we are responsible of the consequences of the technology we're producing, because it always comes with habit building around the products, around the consumption habits, basically. So we are opening core Web3 Hub, and it's open to like AI and all cutting edge technologies. And as a keynote, as an investor, as just a curious person, you can come visit us in Botubilik after 26th of August. Yeah.
And you're right.
Y'all should leave me alone.
Next one.
Everyone who is concerned about what they're going to create next, as a writer, as a creative, AI clearly is a very scary thing, because it can write books, it can do a lot of things, yeah. But I have this dream of being able to have my book in every bedroom, because I'm writing a poetic bedtime story for adults, and it's very interesting how you can have an end result and not know how the how will come to you, and it's quite clear that AI is a how, because I'm about to become an AI avatar. So if you are fearful, if you don't quite understand how AI can serve you, come and talk to me. And yeah.
Okay, I see Tracey.
Yeah, I don't discriminate. Come up to me. I used to be a musician. Obviously, I'm in tech, Web3. I've just finished a law degree. There's loads of facets. I love to talk about everything. So yeah, just come and see me. If you need developers, or if you're building something, if you want to get introduced to VCs, it's endless. So yeah, I'm open.
Come to me if you want to have nightmares tonight. No, truthfully speaking, if we solve this major problem, this challenge, then I think we actually get to use AI to transform humanity, to go into a post-humanity state where we spread to the stars. So I think there's up to 10 to the 54th type of human equivalents that we could become as a species if we actually solve this. Because now we'll have these digital agents, these AIs that actually help us do everything we want to do, including travel to the stars. So I think if we make it, it'll be a fantastically fun time, and I'm looking forward to that.
Well, I thought that we left our pessimist with a bit of optimism. I think this panel was a success. So I want to just thank everyone. And as we said, I think what we said at the very beginning about this being sort of a ripple effect around the conversations will continue on beyond this room. And I think you guys are testament to that. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your brains and your visions, your fears and your aspirations. And now we're going to close out.